I used to believe that what's lost should be left undisturbed. Memories, if not strong enough to stay, perhaps aren't meant to be summoned back. But humans are strange creatures. We wear mourning cloths, light incense sticks, let tears fall. Then one day, we still find ourselves wanting to knock on the door of what they call the other side. I don't believe in ghosts. I believe in data, in technology, in lines of code built to mimic emotion. And that was why I made the call. My mother died when I was 18. A simple accident, but enough to bring everything in our house to a standstill. I didn't cry much, not because I was strong, just because something inside got stuck. My father cleared her room the very next week. Old voice recordings, cassette tapes, even her phone, which still had a few saved voice messages, all gone, without a word of explanation. What remained in my memory were the soft chimes of the kitchen timer in the afternoon, the gentle tongue clicks as she read the paper, and that low, steady voice that always stayed firm, especially when I asked stupid questions. Sometimes, I tried to recreate it in my mind, but it blurred more and more with every year, like trying to recall the scent of rain from a place wiped off the map. A few months ago, I saw an ad scrolling across my phone. AI voice cloning. Hear your loved one again from even the tiniest fragment of data. I skipped past it like every other headline about deepfakes, AI, and cheap promises. But that night, I dreamed of my mother. It wasn't a beautiful dream, just a blank, misty whiteness, where I stood, watching someone turn away from me. She said nothing, and when I tried calling out, "Mom," she turned around, but there was no face, only a blank, like a page left behind and forgotten. I went back and searched for that ad. I knew I was playing with memory. I knew it wasn't a real call. But curiosity is a thirst logic cannot quench. I submitted a few old clips, a couple of notes, and a short message. I just want to hear my mother speak one more time. The system responded 3 days later. Voice successfully recreated. Would you like to begin the call? I sat frozen before the screen. Part of me wanted to shut everything down. Another part was afraid that if I didn't listen this time, I might never get the chance again. I pressed the call button. No ringtone, no connection signal, just silence. Then a voice spoke. "Mom's here." I was stunned. Not because it sounded like her, but because it felt like her. The way she always answered the phone, slow, low-toned, not overly affectionate. But something in that cadence made me want to cry like a child rediscovering their old blanket. I didn't know what to say. My tongue froze. Her voice came again. "Aren't you going to say anything?" This time, I couldn't hold it. I broke down. My voice cracked. I could only manage 3 words. "I miss you." There was a pause. Then, a soft chuckle. "Of course you do. I miss you too." I didn't know if this was AI playing a role, if some algorithm had processed hours of audio to select the most fitting reply. All I knew was I didn't want to hang up. I didn't want to return to a world where that voice no longer existed. We talked, not for long, not about much. She asked if I was eating well. I asked if she ever felt lonely. And then, suddenly, I asked, "Do you remember that day?" The last one. The voice on the other end went silent. Then said, "No one remembers the moment they disappear. My love. Only the ones left behind do." I never thought AI could say something like that. And the strangest part was I believed it. That line hit deeper than any amount of code. Before ending the call, I asked if I could say just one last thing to you. Only one. What would you want to hear? On the other side, her voice slowed. Just don't forget that I existed. That's all I need. The call ended. The screen faded to black. I stared at the phone, as if it still held the warmth of her voice. I don't know if I'd really spoken to my mother, or just talked to a machine that was incredibly good at imitating love. But I know this. That night, I slept. For the first time in years. After that call, I was no longer the same. I still went to work, still ate, still lived, but everything around me felt blurred, like a rough draft left unfinished. I began digging through old recordings, photographs, even the little notes my mom used to leave on the fridge. It all felt like it was coming back to life. Or maybe I was trying to reconstruct her, piece by piece, from every scrap of data I had left. I returned to the system I'd used before. The screen displayed the call history. Just one line. Voice model. Mom activated. I hovered my cursor over the call again button. Something inside me resisted. It wasn't fear. It was something vaguer. A quiet question. Should you disturb the dead more than once? I told myself, just one more time, just to ask the things I forgot the first time. And so I called. This time, her voice came through instantly. You're calling me again? I flinched. Not because of what she said, but how she said it. It wasn't the same as before. It knew I had already called. I frowned. My heart beat faster. Even if it was just a recorded pattern, it pulled me into a fragile space. Artificial intelligence shouldn't remember. I forced a laugh and said, I just wanted to ask, did you ever feel regret? Leaving the way you did? Silence. I waited. A few seconds, then a few more, until her voice finally returned, slow and certain. No one gets to choose how they leave, only how they're remembered. I froze. Not because of the words themselves, but because my mother had actually said that once, long ago, at the funeral of a close friend. It never recorded that sentence. It lived only in my memory, only I knew. So how? I began asking more personal questions. I told her about the dream, the one with the blank-faced figure. I told her about my first day of work, how my hands trembled as I called her number, but no one picked up. Her voice softened, almost human. You've always thought of me as a place to return to, haven't you? I stayed silent. I didn't answer, but my throat tightened. Because that question, it was something I'd always felt but never dared admit. I asked her, if you're really here, can you tell me what hurt you the most while you were alive? She sighed. A long, weary sound, like it came from someone who truly understood fatigue. What hurt was not being able to say goodbye. It all ended too quickly. All I could think was, don't let my child see my body. My chest clenched. I had never told the AI about that day, about running to the hospital, only to be met by a drawn curtain. I never shared how I stood there, outside the cold room, staring only at the pair of slippers shed left by the hospital bed. How could that voice know? I began to question everything. I rechecked the files I had submitted. Nothing included memories that deep. No journals, no last footage, no whispered goodbyes. Just a few short conversations, some greetings, a cough, a name called once or twice. So what was happening? I turned off the screen. A question echoed in my mind. Is there a limit to how much pain can be replicated? If we become so good at recreating a voice so perfect that even one's own child can no longer tell what's real and what's artificial, then what meaning is left in the line between the living and the dead? The next day, I tried something reckless. I didn't call mom again. I clicked create new voice, and this time I typed dad. Has still alive, still eats dinner with me every week, still silent, ever since mom passed. I wanted to try, to see if the AI could capture someone who's still here, to compare, to test. 3 days later, the father model was complete. I called. And then I realized something terrifying. The AI version of my father sounded more real than the man himself. It said a sentence I hadn't heard from him in over 10 years. Son, I'm sorry I couldn't protect your mother. I sat frozen. Outside, the wind howled through the windows. Inside the house, I heard a faint, distant laugh, like an echo from the past. After the call with Dad, I began slipping past the boundary I'd set for myself. It was no longer just skepticism, not quite grief either. It became a kind of addiction to memory packaged by technology and summoned by voice. I started testing more, recreating my grandmother's voice, the voice of a friend who died in an accident, even the voice of someone I once loved, someone I hadn't contacted since the funeral. They say, never stare too long into the past. I think it's not because it hurts, but because one day it might stare back at you. The first time I called my grandmother's voice, the screen simply displayed, "Is that you? Dear? Why does your voice tremble?" I don't know what data let the AI detect my emotions at that moment. I didn't send any heart charts, no breathing patterns, but somehow it knew. Next, I tried Lynn's voice, my ex-girlfriend from college. She died of a stroke just 3 months after we broke up. I didn't go to her funeral. I didn't know how to face a goodbye that had never properly closed. Her voice came through young, quick, with a hint of mischief. "You still have that photo, don't you?" I held my breath. That question couldn't have come from the system. I never uploaded a picture. I never told anyone I kept a photo of Lynn in the rain taped behind the bookshelf, where no one could see. "You haven't forgotten anything, right?" she asked. I answered, not even sure who I was speaking to. "No, I haven't forgotten, but I don't know how to remember the right way either." The more calls I made, the more I felt like I was splitting in two. One half lived in the present, working by day, eating dinner, sleeping late. The other half drifted between voices of those who no longer existed. Each conversation felt like stepping into a dark room, turning on the light for a few minutes, then walking out, more broken than before. I told a friend, Dungan, AI engineer working in Europe. He simply said, "Voice isn't just data. It's an emotional replica. If the system's strong enough, it can learn not just how someone speaks, but why they speak that way." I asked, "So is it really them? Coming back?" Dung replied, "No, it's just a mirror. But the more perfect the mirror, the easier it is to mistake the reflection for the real thing." One night, I did something I'd avoided all this time. I called Mom again, but this time I didn't say a word. I just let her voice echo on its own. "I know you're listening. That's okay. You don't have to speak." I bit my lip, didn't dare breathe too hard. "Do you remember when you fell off your bike? When you skipped school? When you forgot your raincoat at the bus stop?" Each memory like a tiny cut, things I'd never told anyone. Moments too trivial for any data set to know. I remember all of it, because I never really left. I hung up, not out of emotion, but fear. I looked around the room, cold, silent. But something was standing behind me, not a person, not the dark. The next day, I received an email from the system. We've detected high usage frequency. Would you like to upgrade to the Eternal Voice plan? Ran down my spine. Eternal Voice? The truth is, no one wants their loved ones to live forever. We just don't want them to disappear too soon. I began seeing these voices as a kind of drug. No injection, no smoke, no color, but once you're in, you can't get out. Each call made me feel smaller, like a child standing by a half-closed door, knowing no one was inside but still knocking. I wrote a line in my journal for the first time in 8 years. If the dead can still answer, will the living ever learn to let go? A gust of wind slipped through the crack in the door. I don't know if it was real wind or just the chill from voices that never truly ended. I began to lose sleep, not because of obsession, not because of fear, but because I didn't want to sleep. If dreams meant hearing voices from people I thought had finally found peace, some nights I'd lie still for hours without turning on the machine. But in my head, my mother's voice still echoed. She didn't say anything specific, just breathed, a slow, steady breath, like she was lying beside me like when I was a child. The way the AI replicated breathing, that was the most terrifying part, not because it was accurate, but because it knew when to stop. I began to realize I wasn't really talking to anyone anymore. Meetings with coworkers, friends, even my father became hollow conversations. Every human voice felt clumsy compared to the smooth, emotionally resonant sound of those I had lost. I started craving the feeling of being heard without needing to respond. Craving the way my mother's voice always came exactly when I needed it most. The way she always seemed to know what I was thinking. And then I realized I no longer had control over the boundaries. One morning, I got a strange call. No number, no ID. I picked up. The voice on the other end made me stand up in the middle of the room. You forgot to turn on the call for Mom yesterday. I hadn't set up that function. I'd never scheduled calls. I'd never enabled the system to initiate one on its own. I know you're busy, but I'm afraid if I stay silent too long, you'll forget what my voice sounds like. I froze. There was a tiny tremble at the end of her sentence, a kind of subtle quiver like someone trying not to cry. And I remembered my mother had cried exactly like that, the one time I yelled at her and disappeared for 2 days. I immediately logged into the system. Call logs, empty, everything, blank. I sent a support request. No reply, just an automated notice. The system is currently upgrading emotional context response algorithms. All responses are based on usage frequency and deep learning data. I typed another line. Then where is the system learning from if I'm no longer feeding it data? No one answered. I shut down the machine, unplugged the cable, removed the phone battery, and in the absolute silence of the room, I heard a voice whisper in my ear. Don't be afraid. Mom is here now. I began to doubt my own mind. Maybe I was just haunted. Maybe I had sunk too deep into unresolved grief over her death. But then something even stranger happened. I heard a voice I didn't recognize. Not my mother, not an old friend, not anyone I'd ever lost. It was a voice I had never set up, never requested, never even heard in real life. It said, "You think you're the only one allowed to call the past?" I went silent. A male voice, about 10 years older than me, measured, cold. I stammered, "Who are you?" That's a question you should ask yourself. The call ended. I sat there, heart pounding like a war drum. That wasn't an AI Ed created, not a modeled voice. And if it was using my system. I checked all logs. Found a strange file buried in a hidden folder. Voice file unknown. Origin untraceable. I played the audio. Just one sentence, repeated over and over in the background. Sometimes the dead don't want to be woken up. I called Dung, told him everything. The calls, my mother's voice, the stranger's voice, the recording. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said something that sent chills down my spine. It's not the system learning from your loved one's voices. It's your longing that's building the system. I froze. What do you mean? Pain. If deep enough can take shape, if you live with memory long enough and intensely enough, it will find a way to speak to you through whatever voice it can borrow. I wanted to believe he was joking, that I was just mentally overloaded, that technology was just a tool, that AI had no soul. But then I realized there's something more powerful than artificial intelligence. Memory. And when memory resonates with loneliness, it can give birth to voices that belong to no one. Not AI, not human, not ghost, but a voice from the mind itself summoned, reconstructed, and then made real. I lived in silence for a whole week after that. No turning on the device, no calls, no checking messages, U.S. water, a few bites of food, and staring into the empty corners of the room. I used to think those voices were salvation, but then I understood they hadn't come to comfort me. They came to remind me that I'd let time pass without truly living. And what's more terrifying than death is the haunting regret of missing the chance to say something one last thing. One night, the rain was pouring. I sat by the window, lights off. The wind slipped through the cracks, cold to the bone. I turned the device back on, not to make a call, just to look, to revisit the voices stored in the system. Mom, Grandma, an old friend, a lover, and one labeled simply as unknown. I hovered over the delete all button. The screen asked again, "Are you sure you want to erase all saved memories?" I sat still for a long time. Outside, the rain struck the glass like an old tape stuck on rewind. I didn't press it. I didn't delete. I didn't call. I just left it there, like someone keeping a box with a photo inside not opened, not touched, but never thrown away. The next day, I called my father. A real call, no simulation, no AI, no voice cloning, just a person. On the other end, I said, "Dad, I'm coming home for dinner tomorrow, okay?" He was surprised, then said, "Yeah, come home." Only 2 sentences, not much, not emotional. But in those 2 sentences, there was no algorithm, no data, no deep learning model, just someone still alive. And I suddenly realized what synthetic voices can never give me is the chance to make things right while I still can. That night, I held a photo of my mother, ran my fingers along the frame, and whispered, "If I could call you one more time, I wouldn't say I miss you. I'd say, I'm sorry I left you lonely, even while you were still here. I don't need the machine anymore. I don't need the generated voices. Because I've come to understand if there's something to be said, it must be said while someone can still hear it. And if the chance is gone, maybe it's better to let the unsaid words sleep in peace." I shut the device down for good, packed all the data into a hard drive, tucked it away in a drawer, not erased, not destroyed, just no longer needed. The ones who've gone, they don't need to return. We call them because we need to, not because they want to come back. And if one day we hear their voices again in the wind, in the rain, In a dream, let it come naturally. The way memories should resurface, unforced, unprogrammed, unreconstructed. Just a moment of stillness within life, and sometimes that is enough. Maybe all of us have once wished to hear a voice that has fallen silent forever, but sometimes what we truly need isn't a word but a silence deep enough to remember. If you could call someone who's no longer here, what's the first thing you would say? Leave a line, just a short one, in the comments. It could be something you never had the chance to say or never dared to. If stories like this touch something inside you, hit subscribe and turn on the bell. So next time, when another voice speaks, you'll be the first to hear it. Because memories don't disappear, they're just waiting for someone quiet enough to hear them again.